Globalization. It's a word we hear all the time, right? But what does it actually mean? Well, it's not some abstract, far-off concept. It's something that's shaping your world, literally from the moment you wake up.
So let's just dive right in. And to do that, let's just talk about your morning. Seriously, before you've even had that first sip of coffee, you've already made moves in this huge global game. Let's walk through it.
Okay, so that alarm clock that jolted you awake? Yeah, chances are the design, the tech, it all came from a company based in Japan. A total powerhouse in electronics.
And what about that coffee you're brewing, the one you desperately need to function? Those beans were probably grown and harvested by farmers thousands of miles away, way up in the mountains of Colombia.
Even the shirt you're pulling on, odds are it was stitched together in a factory in, say, Vietnam. So think about it. Just in the first few minutes of being awake, you've connected with Japan, Colombia, and Vietnam. That right there is globalization.
So, okay, it seems pretty simple when you see it all around you like that. But it's really not. We need to go a bit deeper than coffee and t-shirts to really get a handle on what we're talking about. And, this kind of gets to the heart of the problem. A researcher, Dr. Vas Terrace, made a great point. He said that people have these really strong opinions about trade and globalization, but a lot of the time they don't actually know the fundamentals. Our goal here is to fix that, to get to that real understanding. So, at its most basic level, here's the textbook definition. Globalization is this huge trend where countries just become more and more interconnected. It's this big shift away from thinking about separate national economies and towards one massive, integrated global economy. And this whole thing really splits into two big ideas. First, you've got the globalization of markets. This is the what. It's why you can find an iPhone or a Starbucks pretty much anywhere on Earth. Our tastes are kind of merging. Then you've got the globalization of production. This is the how. It's about companies making things wherever it's cheapest or best to do so, sourcing parts from one country and assembling them in another. And to really get a sense of the scale here, you have to look at the big players, multinational corporations. Some of these companies have economic power that's, well, it's bigger than entire countries. I mean, just let this sink in. Walmart's revenue is larger than the entire GDP of Sweden. When one company is that big, its influence is just massive. It's not just about what's for sale, it's about labor laws, environmental rules, and even culture itself. So, how in the world did we get here? This didn't just happen overnight, right? Nope. This whole massive web of connections was really kicked into high gear by two powerful forces that have been working together for decades. And what are those two engines? It's pretty simple, actually. Falling barriers and new technology. On one hand, you've got governments deliberately tearing down trade barriers. They lowered tariffs, which are just taxes on imports, making it way cheaper to trade stuff across borders. And on the other hand, you've got this explosion of technology. The cost of shipping things and communicating instantly has just cratered, making global business easier and cheaper than ever before. What's really cool is when you look at how these two things, policy and tech, have kind of danced with each other over time. You get a tech breakthrough, like the first telegraph cable across the Atlantic. That opens up new possibilities. So then you need new rules, which is where things like GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, and later the WTO, the World Trade Organization, come in. They set the rules of the road. And each step just feeds the next one, creating this feedback loop that's just been speeding up and up. But, and this is a big but, not everyone is throwing a party for globalization, not by a long shot. This whole process has sparked one of the biggest, most heated debates of our time. And there are really passionate arguments on every side. And look, there's no easy answer here. As we get into this debate, it's so important to remember this one thing. For every single argument for globalization, there's a counter-argument. It's a story of trade-offs. There are definite winners, and there are definite losers. Okay, let's start with the big one, jobs and wages. This is where things get really intense. The argument against it goes like this. Companies chase cheap labor, move factories overseas, and that kills manufacturing jobs in richer countries and pushes down wages for everyone else. But the argument for it says, hold on, this makes everything more efficient, creates more wealth overall, opens up new kinds of jobs, and it gives developing countries a chance to grow their economies. And these numbers right here, this is what's fueling that whole debate. Just look at the average salary for an IT professional. The difference is just
Staggering. That huge gap is a massive, massive incentive for a company to outsource work. For the company, that's a win for efficiency. But for a worker in the US or Germany, it can feel like a punch to the gut.
All right, next up, culture. This is another hot-button issue. The big question is, are we all just becoming the same? Critics worry that globalization is creating this bland, generic world culture where local traditions get bulldozed by big global brands. But then you have the other side, which says no way. They argue it actually lets unique cultures shine on a global stage. Think about K-pop, Nollywood movies from Nigeria, or French food. They say all this mixing actually makes the world more interesting and diverse, not less.
And finally, we've got to talk about power. Who's really in charge here? A huge concern is that globalization weakens countries. The idea is that when a nation joins something like the WTO, it has to follow international rules, even if those rules go against its own interests. But the flip side of that coin is that we need that kind of cooperation to solve the really big problems, things like climate change, pandemics, human rights. No single country can tackle those alone.
All right, so we've heard both sides of the story. So who's right? What's the final verdict on globalization? Well, here's the thing. There isn't one. It's just not that simple.
So let's just boil it all down. Globalization? It's that ever-deepening web connecting all of us, and it's driven by big changes in policy and technology. Yes, it creates a ton of economic value and opportunity. But, and this is really the most important part, the benefits are not shared equally. And that simple fact creates huge challenges that go hand in hand with all the progress. At the end of the day, you can't just flip a switch and turn globalization off. It's a permanent, fundamental part of our world now. So the conversation has shifted. It's no longer about if we should have globalization. The real question, the one we all have to grapple with, is how we manage it. How do we make sure its incredible power benefits the many and not just the few? That's the challenge of our time.